right. I hope you're all here for developing creativity. If you're not, please stay. I still want you here. Makes me feel better to have a bigger audience, all that sort of thing. So, of course, we have to do the obligatory About Me slide. I am a BYU computer science student. In fact, I've been a TA for someone in this room. I hope you liked me. I will graduate next April, and I got an A, that's why I like you. Oh, okay. You got an A. I can't remember. I couldn't remember what you got. So I can't wait to graduate. Actually, I'm in the animation program as well, which for a programmer is really interesting. It was actually really intimidating. And on top of that, and this is really weird to say, but I've actually had depression, really severe depression, suicidal depression, and I won. Like, I am stable nowadays. No medications, no nothing. And to win that fight, I had to learn a lot about psychology, real psychology, not the theories that you would learn if you took psychology in college. And I mention that because I will be delving into psychology to explain what I need to explain. But don't worry, it won't be too deep. Full disclaimer, I run an open source project. It is not relevant to this talk. In fact, I'm not even going to tell you what it is. And for those of you who know, be quiet. If I talk about it during this presentation, it'll be for example only, and I don't think I actually talk about it. And I won't answer questions about it either. Just talk to me afterward if you want to. But I'll take questions about this talk at the end. Please remember the slide number. I put them there for a reason. So, why am I here? Why am I giving this talk? More accurately, how did I come up with the idea? The truth is, I've always wanted to be more creative, and I'm pretty sure that since you're in this room, that you probably want to be more creative as well. In fact, how many of you want to be more creative? Do I not see a hand? Not see any hand. Well, I think I saw everyone's hand. Okay, so, yeah. I want to be more creative too. The problem is I've always thought that creativity was something you were born with, and it's a real big struggle because it's like I want to be more creative, but it's something you're born with. How many of you have that same thought? Okay, less of you. This is going to make my talk easier. So, my personal journey, I would actually consider myself to be a creative person now. My journey to that started in BYU spring term 2014, so actually a year ago. I was taking a class called History of Creativity, which I mentioned in my talk last year. And it was really interesting, actually. It was surprising to me how the level of creativity in a society could predict its rise and eventual fall. And it was quite opening, and it was at that point where I watched about how societies could develop creativity. I wondered if people could too. So in fall 2014, I started the animation program, and I took the first intermediate animation class, and I walked into that classroom, and all of these students had applied to the animation program and gotten in. They weren't CS students. I got in because I was a CS student, and I was in the CS animation side. So I was learning about how to write the tools that I was also learning how to use. Whereas they were just, creative, learning how to use the tools, that sort of thing. It was so intimidating. I walk into that class, and people are like doodling, and they're, whatever they're doing. It was just like mind-blowing. And when we all had to introduce ourselves, I'm like, I'm a computer science major. I don't belong here. Please be nice to me. And they were. But if I knew that if I wanted to survive that class, I had to become creative fast, really fast. And I did. And this is what I'm here for, is to show you how I did that, and hopefully to help you to do that. So let's get started. I went to a speaker training 2 months ago, and I was told to capture your attention at the beginning with something funny. So here it is, obligatory Dilbert comic. I'll wait until I hear laughter from everyone. Don't you wish dating was like that? Raise your hand if you're not done yet. Awesome. Oh, there's the laugh. There's the laugh. Okay. So, obviously, if I'm giving a talk like this, I better think now that creativity can be developed. But even though it's obvious, I want to emphasize it. Creativity can be developed. It's a skill, a talent, and a very useful one. Not only that, you can develop creativity. Now, I say that with full confidence because a year ago, I was in your shoes and I was giving a very, very technical talk. It was about programming languages and that sort of thing. And now I'm giving a talk on developing creativity. It's a complete different type of talk. And that's just a year. So if I can do it, you can do it. So right now, I need you to excuse me because this is where we're going to talk about psychology. And specifically about the theory of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. A fixed mindset thinks that skill and talent can't be developed. A fixed mindset says, I'm just no good at dancing. And in fact, by the way, 2 years ago, slightly under 2 years ago, I started fall semester 2013 at BYU, and I was conned to take a folk dance class. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be good at dancing. I actually have cerebral palsy in my right side. There's no way I'm going to be good at dancing. I thought I was always going to be on a beginning team. Well, I was just barely invited to their workshop intensive that will happen at the beginning of fall semester, which means they think I can move up to a higher level team. So, yes, I used to think, literally, I'm just no good at dancing. Well, here I am, and I actually say I'm a dancer. It's really weird. Yes, I know how to dance now. A growth mindset, on the other hand, believes that skill and talent can be grown. And not only that, it believes that they can be grown in anything. A growth mindset says, I can learn how to do that. In fact, what is one thing, I just want a few hands raised, what is one thing that you think is impossible to develop skill and talent in? Besides creativity, of course. Yes? Winning the Nobel Prize, okay. I'd tell you to probably develop skill and talent in politics to do that. So, again, you can learn how to do anything. It may not be a good thing to learn, but... So here's the problem. You all have a fixed mindset. You probably think that your creativity is fixed, like you have as much as you have and no more. Of course, you also don't believe that to some extent by actually coming here, but to the most extent, you think that you were probably born with it, or that you don't have it. And this is why you're here. This is why you think you can't be creative, and you want to see a programmer get up and tell you that you can. Now, to be honest, coming to a conference actually kind of says that you have a growth mindset. You're coming here because you're like, I want to be better. I want to learn how to work with big data better. I want to learn how to work with PHP better, though I don't know why you want to work with PHP. Sorry to anyone who likes PHP. So yes, all of you have a growth mindset in most things. if you think you can't develop creativity, and I'm going to put the if there because I know that some of you can. If you think that you can't develop creativity, you have a fixed mindset in this area, in creativity. And if you have a fixed mindset, you can't even start to develop creativity because you're just like, I can't do it. So, I mean, if you've got that, I can't, you're never going to be able to. You have a massive obstacle right in front of you, and you have to remove it. So that is the first thing we need to do to develop creativity, is to develop a growth mindset. This will help you believe that you can actually develop creativity. And actually, it will come in handy later too. All right, now that I've told you how to remove the obstacle to start, I need to actually probably move to developing creativity. And to do that, I need to define creativity. So let's start out with a very, very smart man. Albert Einstein is credited with saying that creativity is intelligence having fun. Sounds a little bit pithy, but I think it's true. We can still be a little bit more specific. Do you remember the Dilbert comic at the beginning? So let's go back to it. What did Dilbert say? He said creativity is random. And not only that, he explains why he thinks so. He said if creativity were anything but random, someone would have figured out the algorithm by now. Now, there are some unsolvable problems that you just can't figure out algorithms to. And generally, and even if they're unsolvable, you can figure out algorithms that would be super, super expensive. So we can't solve them. But creativity does not have any algorithm at all. So I think he's absolutely right. Creativity really is random. And I know that's kind of a wild claim, but take a moment to think about all of the creative people you know. How many of you would say that, in general, the creative people you know, the artistic, that sort of thing, they're a little weird? Okay? Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever seen one of them do something and think to yourself, that was really random? How many of you experienced that? Okay? I think a lot more of you have experienced it, or that you just don't hang around creative people. When I was in that class, they were all over the place. Two people would be talking to each other, and they'd be in completely different worlds, and yet still talking to each other and having a conversation. It was weird. I mean, all of these people were creative, and they were just they were electrons in an atom just going everywhere. You never knew where they were going to be. So since that point, creative people have always seemed a little random to me. And that's because they are. They are random. They have random thoughts all the time. And more importantly, they let themselves be influenced by those thoughts. And I know that sounds really weird, but you have random thoughts. And I'll explain what I mean later. But they actually let themselves be influenced. And that's the root of their creativity. Because random thoughts are ideas. They may not be good ideas, but they are ideas. And on top of that, creative people are random, but we're programmers, we're sysadmins, whatever. We're very, very technical, very, very, skilled in what we do. We're probably not random. If there's any part of us that's random, it's probably actually a pseudo-random number generator spitting out the same things over and over. So I want you to get rid of that thought, because you are random. You have random thoughts too. You just suppress them. This was the biggest eye-opening thing to me when I started seeing them have all my classmates have those random thoughts, I was just like, I don't have random thoughts. But after watching myself for a while, and I was struggling to create something in the class, I actually had to create a piece of art in 3D. As I was struggling to create it, I started having these random thoughts, and suddenly I wasn't suppressing them anymore. So I know that for me, I had the experience of I've got to create a piece of art. But for you, you haven't really had any experience being random, except that you have. I want you to think about the times that you've participated in brainstorming. Okay? Brainstorming is just a bunch of people getting together to be random, in the hopes that it will be useful. And you can quote me on that. Brainstorming is just a bunch of people getting together to be random. The point is that you've been random before. If you've ever participated in brainstorming and you just start tossing things, like no matter how wacko they may be, you've been random. If you've participated in brainstorming like that, you've been random. And if you haven't, then do it. You'll find that you'll start to develop this creativity. And for those of you that have done it, you can do it again. And you don't need brainstorming to do it. So, as tech-savvy folks, at least I think we're all tech-savvy at this conference, we tend to be quite practical and methodical. Some of us more methodical or more practical than others, but generally we do things algorithmically, for lack of a better term. We expect a process, we expect inputs, we expect outputs. Randomness is nothing like that, neither practical nor methodical. So as a result, we tend to suppress our random thoughts. So, stop it. Just stop suppressing those thoughts. There are times when I'm with my fiance and I will just get a random thought about our upcoming wedding or something like that, or our future children, something like that, and I'll just I just got a random idea and just right in front of her, and we both think about it. No, that one's stupid, and we move on. But I will always she's so used to me just saying random things all the time, just because I don't suppress those thoughts anymore. And just so you know, the next section of the talk will hopefully show you how to become comfortable having those thoughts. So, the second thing you need to do to develop creativity is be random. So, let's pretend that you've succeeded on the last point. You are now random, and now you're having these random thoughts. And they are driving you crazy. All these random thoughts, they're dumb ideas. It's just what do I do with them? I just toss them out the window. What can I do? Well, let's take a lesson from statistics. Statisticians love random. They collect random data all the time. In fact, if something is not random, it's tainted. So let me ask you a question. Do they just use the data as is? How many of you have taken a statistics class? How many times did you just use the data as you got it? None. None? I'm assuming that's none. Exactly. They do not just use it as is. They process it, they work on it, they interpret it. That's the real work of statistics. That's where you got so tired of your teacher saying, you got to do this and this exact process. They were processing the data. Same thing with raw materials. With most things, you can't just use raw material. You have to process it into something useful. Trees have to be turned into lumber. Ore has to be turned into metal. Has to be melted down and smelted. The same goes for random thoughts, ideas. To process an idea and to turn it into something useful or even great, which many ideas can become great, you have to let it evolve. You have to let it change. You can mix it with other ideas. You can do all sorts of things. When I was at BYU, Idaho, I worked as a TA for a professor. He was teaching the software development class. And one of the stories he would tell his students is of one time when management shut all of them, engineers. This was a manufacturing company. So they had computer scientists, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, manufacturing engineers, material engineers, that sort of thing. These were highly technical people. Shut them in a room because management had heard something about, well, if you can get your people to come up with so many ideas, they can improve the process. So management shut them in this room and told them, you are not coming out of that room until you have 200 ideas about how to improve our processes. And grumble, 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 well, we got to do it. So they start coming up with ideas, and they're very practical and methodical, and they start building these ideas up, and they get to about 50, and then it just stops, and no one can think of anything else. And the very last ideas were just kind of little tiny tweaks, and they're stuck. And suddenly one guy just gets fed up and just throws something random out there. And someone else throws something random. And suddenly you get this flood of random, just, and they go clear up to 150 ideas. So now they've got 50 useful ideas and 100 random ideas. Well, at that point, they all looked at the list of ideas, and there were a lot of them, obviously, and they're just like, wait a second, some of those random ideas might actually work. So they start picking and choosing and working and molding and evolving and doing all sorts of work with all of the ideas, and eventually they start creeping back above 150, 160, and they're starting to get closer to 200 ideas. And when they hit that point, they had several great ideas of things to implement to improve their processes, and they did, and it worked. Something that management had them do that actually worked. I was really surprised when he told me that too. But the point of the story is, yeah, they were random, and they were really random, but they also took those random ideas and they worked on them. You've got to work on those ideas. Ed Catmull, who is the president of Disney Animation and Pixar, came to BYU in January and gave a talk. And it was basically, he was talking about the material in his book Creativity Inc., which I suggest you read. And he talked about this concept of an ugly baby. He said, all of Pixar's films suck at the beginning. They just suck. Up started out as a story where you had a castle in the sky and a king and two brothers, and one of the brothers falls down into the middle of a war zone, and there was this big bird and something. And the only thing that they kept in the original idea of Up was the title and the bird. It was an ugly baby, and that one had to be thrown out with the bathwater. But the one that came in was also ugly, but they managed to evolve it. Inside Out, by the same director. It's coming out this June, and I'm excited. He talks about that one too, and how when Pete Docter, the director, first started working on it, Pete Docter is a really random dude. He directed Monsters University. He was the one who did Up, and a lot of his stories start out as just like a mess. And Pixar's Brain Trust, which is a highly respected set of people within Pixar, they meet together once every couple months or so to review a movie. And so Pete Docter brings this idea in front of them, and they're like, well, it's got some potential, but you've got to tighten this up. You've got to set the rules, do all that sort of thing. And so Pete Docter is like, oh yeah, I got to do that. And he sits down and works on it even more. He didn't just, yes, his idea was random. Thoughts are, emotions are characters in the brain, and the whole movie is about like traveling the brain or something like that. It's really random, but it evolved into something great. So you got to let these ideas evolve. Beware, in fact, don't let dumb ideas embarrass you. Don't let them embarrass you. When I'm talking to my fiance and I throw a random idea and it really is dumb, oh well, and we move on. And I'm not embarrassed. She knows I do it. She knows that I'm going to come up with random things, but she also knows that I'll throw them away. And that's okay. Dumb ideas shouldn't embarrass you. And in fact, some of the dumbest ideas can become the greatest of ideas because they can evolve. In fact, Bill Bernbach said, any idea can turn to dust or magic depending on the talent that rubs against it. Okay? All of you in this room, you're pretty darn talented. Okay? We're highly technical people in a highly technical world. This world is very complicated, and we are on top. We are among the best of the best, I think. You're here at a conference. You're becoming better. You learn, you go home, and you just amaze the people around you, right? I'm hoping all of you do that because you all have the talent to do it. So, software, for us, we can improve that. Ideas really aren't any harder. It's just a matter of learning how to do it. Just like you had to learn how to debug, you need to learn how to debug ideas. So the third thing that you need to develop creativity is to develop raw ideas. And in fact, we're actually quite near the end, because the last thing that you need to develop creativity is to not give up. Don't ever give up. It was a year for me. I still don't like the artwork I do. Just don't give up. Remember that it will take a while to become creative. And you will come up with a lot of embarrassing ideas, a lot of dumb ideas, a lot of ideas that you will end up throwing in the trash, and a lot of ideas that you will think are dumb and actually might be dumb, but you won't throw them in the garbage because they have something that you want to put into another idea, or you take two really dumb ideas and somehow mix them and they're not dumb anymore. This is where that growth mindset I talked about will be useful, where you are discouraged and you're like, well, I'm not getting anywhere. You've got to remember that you can grow in creativity. You can grow your talent there. It will help you to keep going to do that. Okay? So, don't give up. And before we go to this one final note, I want to do an exercise with you all. So if you have your pencils and your paper, since we have a lot more time, I need you to do this. I need you to take a piece of paper and I need you to fill it with circles. Just fill it with circles. I don't care how you do it. This is an exercise that my animation teacher had me do, by the way. This doesn't just come from nowhere. I'm not smart enough to come up with this. Most of you should probably be about done, because I think I can guess what sort of things you were drawing, what sort of circles you were drawing. Whoops. All right. How many of you are not finished? Okay. We'll let you have a couple more minutes, or a minute or so.
It's not going to terminate, so whatever you're doing.
Oh, it's not going to terminate? Okay. So I have a question, and I don't know how many of you will be able to see this, but on my piece of paper, I drew a bunch of circles in rows and columns, just filled up the paper as neat and as evenly and neat as I could. How many of you drew something like this? You all are doing really well, because that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do something like this. And in fact, what can I do? Well, this right here is a flower. And this right here is the Triforce. So I would, after this talk, I would suggest you all go home, look at different parts of your random circles, and you've already got a picture there. That's actually a good one. I want you to go home and try to see how many things you can see in your random circles. And if they're not random, try to do something random, and then see if you can identify random things inside of those circles. You'll find that bubble art is actually quite pleasing to look at. But the point of that exercise is we are not doing practical, methodical, even columns, even rows. We're going a little crazy. And if you can do that, and then look at it and enjoy, like, take it home to your kids or whatever and have them, like, go to town on it, that would be fun. So, one final note before we finish. I believe in inspiration. And if you do too, whatever the source may be, I would encourage you to take advantage of it. And with that, I think, any questions? Yes?
You mentioned almost at the beginning of your talk that the level of creativity in a society can predict a society's rise and fall.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that? I haven't heard that.
Well, as it turns out, I'll take two different regions of the world, for example. Mesopotamia was invaded and conquered time and time again. We have Assyria, Babylonia, and even before that, many different types, many different societies and civilizations. Egypt had two changes of, basically, they had considered three eras. So once both Upper and Lower Egypt were united, that was the early Egypt. Then you had the Middle Egypt and the late Egypt. And the reason that there's only three of those is because Egypt was cut off from the rest of the world. You couldn't cross that desert very well. So you couldn't bring an army to conquer Egypt. So they were safe. But as a result, they declined in creativity over time. Like all of the pyramids and the Sphinx and all of that was constructed in the time of early Egypt. All of the creativity happened around then. The exception would be Queen Hatshepsut, I think. She had obelisks, which was new. Her engineers figured out how to do that. But the pyramids were all built in early Egypt, even though later Egypt had more technology. They didn't build as grand because they didn't have the same creativity. They became stagnant. They became stuck in traditions and all that sort of thing. And when Rome came in, it was actually really quite easy to conquer. Now, in Mesopotamia, you see the history of peoples as people come in and conquer and all that sort of thing. You have this continual mixing, the people kept mixing different cultures and that sort of thing. And Mesopotamia has always been kind of the heart of the world since that time. When you look at India, and its people were basically on their own, and China, whose last emperor died in the 1900s, I think it was like 1918. Oh, he was dethroned in 1918 and died in the 1950s. Okay, that was China's last emperor. China was an empire for thousands of years, and the reason, they were always so creative. And when people would come in to try to conquer, even when Marco Polo and the European powers came in at his time, they couldn't really conquer China because China had an incredible fleet. At that time, China's fleet was so good that Europe just couldn't touch them. And that was thousands of years into their history. If you look at America today, and this is probably the best example because it's close to home. If you look at America today, back in the Industrial Revolution, we had so many great ideas, so much creativity. Back in the early computer age, we were the heart of the innovation. But now, as you can watch that creativity falling off, and we are losing our status as a superpower. Slowly, yes, but we are losing it. And so if a civilization does not have creativity so that they can't keep moving forward, really, then they will eventually become stagnant. And as China did, though they had a good fleet in Marco Polo's time, they kept that same fleet for hundreds of years. And when we showed up, we conquered them without a shot because we had armor and they didn't. So becoming stagnant, it can do the same to a society as all the, shall we say, all the other things that we know that can destroy societies. And if you look at it, they may actually have gone hand in hand in the past. When creativity died out, so did a lot of other things. Does that answer your question a little bit? It's really hard to summarize a whole semester in 5 minutes. Because you'd have to really look at previous civilizations and what this particular civilization did and what that particular civilization did. What I would suggest is go back through history and look at it from the concept of creativity, and you will learn a lot. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes. Oh, no hand? Okay. Well then, thank you all very much, and that's the end of the talk.